Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, braving death to tell a story even though it may be your last one. 4 journalists join us to talk about the risks and the challenges they face when reporting from hotspots around the world. So Malika Vala is our digital producer. Malika, as journalists, we're always trying to deflect the story from us onto other people. But today we've got journalists online and also on our show. We're going to talk about their work and how they navigate the dangers.
And we're finding that they're actually really good storytellers. And so that includes our community who are telling us their own stories and some of the dangers that they face in their countries. So we're hearing from all over the world. This is one tweet we got from Ethiopia. I'm an exiled Ethiopian journalist, actually. And in my country, Ethiopia, the word journalism, this person says, has become synonymous to the word terrorism. We also heard from someone in Uganda. Moses wrote in, "Risk is inevitable for me when I want the people to know the truth, and I've done this on a number of occasions." And those are just 2 countries we want to hear from you wherever you are in the world. Tweet us your questions, your comments with hashtag AJStream.
My name is Zaheer Jan Mohammed. I'm a freelance journalist in Ahmedabad, India, and I'm in the stream.
How far would you go to tell a story? Around the world, journalists risk their lives on a daily basis to deliver the news. Now, some work in places that are so dangerous, every time they do a story, they put their lives at risk. 71 journalists were killed in connection with their work in 2013, as according to the Reporters Without Borders annual report. And while that's a small decrease from previous year, there were more physical attacks and threats on reporters, while the number of journalists kidnapped more than doubled last year. Syria, Somalia, Pakistan, they remain among the 5 deadliest countries for the media, and they were joined by India and the Philippines, which replaced Mexico and Brazil. So why do some journalists choose to work in these high-risk areas, and what keeps them going? Here to share their experiences are 4 journalists. With us in the studio we have Raza Rumi. Raza is the consulting editor of the Friday Times and a presenter on Express TV in Pakistan. Carlotta Gul is a British journalist working as a North Africa correspondent for the New York Times. Carlotta spent nearly 12 years covering the war in Afghanistan, and Carlotta will be joining us via the phone. And Anabel Hernandez is a Mexican investigative journalist and author of Narcoland, The Mexican Drug Lords and Their Godfather. And Abaka Al-Badri is a freelance Somali journalist who's worked with the Los Angeles Times, the European Press Photo Agency and Al Jazeera. It's great to have you all here in the stream, journos. Okay, let me start back on my laptop. The deadliest countries where journalists are killed. Number 5, Pakistan, Raza. This is where you work. This is your ground zero for you in terms of where you gather news and information, etc. When you see that as number 5, the most anywhere in the world you could work, your country is right there. Does that resonate?
Yes, it is, and it resonates. Of course, there's a personal story to tell, but even otherwise, as you were mentioning some numbers, in Pakistan, almost 44 journalists have been killed in the last 7 to 8 years. And there are countless others who have been threatened or abducted and then released. And a lot of them face, day-to-day obstacles in reporting freely, independently. And, amongst this number, I mean, I'm one of them as well, because nearly a month ago I was attacked in Lahore, where I was working on my TV show, and while I was coming back home, somebody sprayed bullets on my car, and my driver died in that attack.
So the one who just slow down a moment. We're going to look at some pictures, and this is the most it's an incredible story. So you're leaving work. And then what happens? You're with a driver.
Yes.
Okay.
And I was with the driver and going home, turning on a dark corner, and suddenly there were these 6 assassins waiting. Very well planned, well executed attack, and they sprayed bullets, and of course I ducked. I had some security training, as we were talking about it, from my previous careers, and so that came in handy, and I immediately ducked at the first sound of the bullet. But it couldn't save my driver, and the other person in the car was also injured, and that has obviously changed my perspective. I mean, mean, it hasn't changed my commitment or my passion for writing and commenting, but surely it has shown to me from a very personal, experiential point of view what are the hazards of saying things which anger the extremists in my country. And you know, later on the police have nabbed some people linked to a large extremist organization who were involved in attacking me.
What do you think you said that made somebody want to kill you?
I think it's just that, of course, when you challenge the narratives of extremists, how hollow and how wrong they are, and when you talk of human rights and about the rights of all humans, you know, because in Pakistan you have this, rising tide of Islamism and extremism, and when you speak about, individual rights, about the rights of non-Muslims, certain groups get angered, and they then obviously got back and tried to eliminate me. I've survived, but I really don't know what about my other colleagues, you know, who work in even harder and more difficult positions, you know, and I'm lucky that I got out, you know, quietly in the middle of the night, but there's so many who cannot do that, you know. So I think it's overall, there's a lot of debate going on in Pakistan, because after me, another senior TV anchor and a journalist was attacked, and he got 6 bullets. He's still recovering in the hospital. So there's a huge debate going on in Pakistan that the state has to do something about these groups, you know, whether they are from the state intelligence agencies or the non-state actors from the extremist groups who attack people for saying or speaking the truth.
And Reza, you know, it's because of stories like that that we see tweets like this from BK, who says, in Pakistan, you can't be a journalist without a life insurance plan. Conditions here are very dangerous for journalists. And Annabelle, I'd like your thoughts on how that differs in your experience in Mexico. We got a tweet from Brian who says, in Mexico, independent media has been kidnapped by the government. Those who disagree are quickly silenced. You've had experiences in which you've been silenced, for lack of a better word, as well. Can you share that with us?
Well, yes. I mean, the situation in Mexico is not less dangerous than in Pakistan or Syria. As you know, in Mexico have been murdered just in 8 years more than 80 journalists. These journalists, most of them, have been raped, tortured, cut in pieces, and put their bodies in black bag of garbage in the streets. That's the way how the government and the drug cartels kill to the journalists in Mexico. So being a journalist in Mexico is very dangerous. Of course, the government is trying by several years to silence to the free journalists, to take the control of the many media through the advertising. But actually in Mexico exists, like me, many other journalists that really believe in our job, and that we really believe in the right of the people to know the truth about what's happening in Mexico.
So Annabelle, what do you do to keep yourself safe? You just reeled off a list of horrific things that happen to journalists in Mexico. What are your coping strategies to make sure that you don't become one of those statistics?
Well, really, each day is difficult to survive to the other one. Just last December, one command of 11 armed men with large weapons took the control of the site where I live by more than 30 minutes. They came inside to my house. I wasn't here, neither my kids, but they didn't steal anything. They said to my neighbors that they were federal police and that was a legal operation. They just get inside to my house. They was searching in my documents. They put the guns on the heads of my neighbors to force them to tell which was my house. And well, since now, really my mission of human rights in Mexico.
So Annabelle, I'm listening to this. When is it enough? When do you go, okay, I'm done with journalism now? They come in, they mess with my family, they mess with my neighbors. Okay, I'm done. Where is that point for you?
That word doesn't exist for me. Really, that word doesn't exist for me. I think, for me, be a journalist is an honor. To have the opportunity to serve the society, for me, is really an honor. I just can't decline to that. I mean,
wonderful,
be a journalist is the most important
Annabelle.
thing of my life.
I'm intrigued by the fact that you've also covered the drug lords and their operations. So, I mean, is the state taking some measures to actually fight their power and protect the profession and people like you, you know, brave, passionate people like you?
No, the problem in Mexico is that the government wants to kill us, the government wants to silence to us, but also the drug cartels. I mean, the journalists are between this fight, and we don't have the protection from anyone. I mean, right now, the federal government tried to keep out my bodyguards. I mean, they really want to let me alone and just let to the people to kill me.
Malika,
it's terrible.
It's these stories, of course, that are resonating with our community, but they're sharing their own stories as well. I want to share this tweet from Zubair, who writes us his experience from Somalia. He says, in my country, Somalia, journalists face murder, detention, torture to get to the truth and to publish it to the public. So, Abubakar, of course, naturally, I'm going to go to you. I actually would like to direct this question to you, though, because on the back of hearing what it's like in Somalia, Patrick wants to know what motivates and inspires journalists like you to risk your lives to tell these stories.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thanks, Patrick. Let me tell you this. When I was 11 years old, 24 years ago, I started seeing dead bodies in the streets of Mogadishu and other cities where I collect to. Then from 1991 up to 2000, 11 years, I was witnessing the people killing each other, people suffering, children dying in the streets, and all this, and no one was telling the story of those people. Then I decided myself to tell the story, because if I don't do it, who would do it? It doesn't mean that I'm not facing the risk, the danger. I saw my friends killed in front of me. I saw a lot of my friends worried about the killing of the other friends. And
Abubakar, hold on one moment. It's interesting that journalists who work in dangerous places, they reel off things like, I was going home and somebody tried to shoot me. People came into my home and they put guns on my neighbor's head, and Abubakar said, I see my friends shot in front of me. You say it like it's a daily occurrence. So for those of us who don't work in these kind of situations, take us back to that moment where your friends were killed in front of you, and how you survived and how they didn't.
Let me tell you this story. Sometime in August 2007, in the night I was chatting with one of my friends who got a death threat. And in the morning, by 8 o'clock, he was killed. And we went to the cemeteries to bury him and prepare the funeral. At that time, I was working for Al Jazeera, and I was covering the story for Al Jazeera. When we were returning from the grave, the boss, the owner of the radio, which the journalist who was killed was working for as a senior director, was killed as well in front of me. At the same time, 5 minutes before that owner of the media, Ali Imam, was killed, I was connecting him to the news desk of Al Jazeera in Doha. When the guys, the news desk in Doha, when I told them that Ali is dead now, even they were very surprised, and it was like a drama movie happening in front of me. The other thing I can tell you is there was a severe fighting in the streets of Mogadishu. I was a photographer. I was the only photographer doing the photos of some soldiers killed and dragged in the streets of Mogadishu.
So Abubakar, I'm just wondering if you death and mayhem seems to be around you all of the time in Mogadishu and in Somalia. Are you afraid, are you scared when these things happen, or are you hardened against them and the story is the most important thing?
Let me tell you this thing. We are afraid of everything they are doing to us, but it's not stopping us from doing it. What we are committed is just to fear, but not to stop doing. I can tell you that the freedom we have in Somalia is the freedom to fear, but not the freedom to tell the truth. but we still have the freedom to tell whether we are killed or not. And in Somalia, what we say is, those who attack the media has no prison to keep us, but graves to put us. That's why we also decided not to accept what they want to do to us.
Right.
They want to silence us, and we are not going to keep silent. We tell the stories, even if they kill whatever, because everyone would die, but you die with what you believe in, instead of dying just silencing yourself from someone who wanted to keep you silent.
Right.
That's why we are there.
Carlotta, I'd like to bring you in here because recently, of course, you were based in Afghanistan, and there's a tweet here from Natalia. We all know of several recent attacks in Afghanistan, and Natalia just tweeted in a few minutes ago, have you faced any situation when your fellow colleagues were hurt, targeted, or killed, and how did you deal with that? Carlotta, you have had experience with that, is that correct?
Well, that's the sad thing. Just very recently, I was in Kabul just before the elections at the beginning of April, and had 3 great days visiting friends, and especially doing some reporting with 2 great friends, Kathy Gannon of Associated Press and Anya Niedringhouse, who was with her also, who's a photographer from Associated Press. They've both been covering that country for years, and we had lunch, but we had some fun, and we also went reporting. And then I flew to America, and I wake up my first morning in America to see all these messages from people to say how sorry they are, and I realized something terrible has happened. And in fact, they were both together in eastern Afghanistan, and a policeman opened fire on their car. And Anya was killed immediately, and Kathy very badly wounded. She's still in hospital. So it was a horrible shock to be so far away from them and to have seen them so recently. But also to 2 people who really have reported longer than me and always seem to be around and covering the stories I was covering. So yeah, it was a bad day that day.
Carlotta, I'd love you to do a little bit of myth busting for our international audience. When people see foreign correspondents working from war zones, it seems, not for us here in a news network, but for outsiders, it seems like, well, that's the highest thing I can be. I can be a foreign correspondent, I can go to war, it's glamorous. Can you myth bust for us? What is it really like?
It's not glamorous.
Right.
It's usually you're down in the muck and the mud. I mean, I remember, times when I've been on an embed, or I remember starting my career in Chechnya and not having a shower for 2 weeks. So it's never easy, and you're usually very dirty, and you're usually running on an empty stomach somewhere, either looking for a phone or looking for a story or whatever. But what keeps you going, I think, is the people you meet, and it's either your colleagues, the journalists, because there's a great camaraderie in difficult places where people pitch in and help each other and watch your back. And then the people that you meet and see, especially when you're covering wars, you're just so moved by what you're seeing that you're driven to keep working, even if it's through the snow and the ice and the cold and the night, and to get the story out, because you feel people must know what's happening here. And I think when it's war, you just feel it's the most important thing. To tell people what's happening, so people can judge whether they're politicians or just ordinary people at home or people in the next village. People need information more than anything.
Sure.
And so you're driven by that, and you tend not to think about the discomfort.
Sure. So Raza, when you left Pakistan after this attempt on your life, you left in a hurry.
Yes.
What did you take?
Well, nothing actually. Just a few clothes, a few books, whatever was accessible. I mean, you know, my home, all my belongings are there. I have to sort that out, and I'm hoping I can go back soon, but only when, you know, there is sufficient assurance that those who try to kill me would be prosecuted, and you know, the threat no longer exists, because it does at the moment.
So what's the personal cost then? You literally left with a few things.
Yes.
What is the personal cost on your life for saying, I am still going to be a journalist, I'm still going to write?
Well, I mean, the cost is very clear. I mean, when I'm going to write and speak and do whatever I've been doing before, I know the hazards now, that I would have to face a very tough situation.
Right.
And I think a lot of our colleagues, like Somalia or even, you know, in Mexico, what we heard, you know, people breaking into the homes, kids being harassed. You know, these are common things. In Pakistan, there's so many conflict zones, you know, next to Afghanistan, the tribal areas, the province of Balochistan. A lot of my colleagues, you know, their threats, their abductions, their killings are not even sufficiently reported, let alone highlighted. And, you know, it just makes me wonder that how globally, how common the story is, that you are attacked by, on the one hand by the governments, and on the other hand by powerful mafia of various kinds.
Right. Malika.
Well, Annabelle, I have a question here from you, because we are getting them fast and heavy from our community. Annabelle, I want you to listen to this video comment from someone who has a question on the difference between freelance journalists and journalists who are attached to an organization.
As a freelancer, it's definitely riskier to go out into the field without the backing of a formal organization. Having said that, if you've done your homework and your research, then it's fine to take a calculated and an educated risk in going out to a danger zone, because I feel that access and personal stories definitely make your narrative more compelling and can enhance the overall story and picture.
Can you tell us about some of those extra risks that freelance journalists have to take? Looks like we might have lost.
Do you hear me?
You're there. Can you tell us about those extra risks? Yes, we can hear you. We had a question about the risks that freelancers have to take.
Well, first, if you let me, I really want to say that not only these countries are on the freedom of express is under danger. I mean, right now, I think the global situation, every journalist in every country is in danger, even that countries that believes that they really have freedom of expression. I mean, I just have been in the local symposium in Berkeley just 1 week ago, talking with the journalists of New York Times, Washington Post, New Yorker, the most important media in US. And all of them said, well, we agreed that even they are in USA, they really feel afraid about the government and how the government spy them.
Annabelle?
And how the government try to don't let them do the job.
Okay.
I mean,
Annabelle, I'm going to ask you to take a breath. Annabelle, take a breath for a moment. And I'll take a breath for a moment, because we're just coming up to the very end of this part of the program. But we are going to come back to you at stream.aljazeera.com, because we have Carlotta and Raza and Annabelle and Abaka, and we're going to talk about their work as journalists in areas that are very, very dangerous. Now, of course, we can't do a show about journalists and the work they do without mentioning our 3 Al Jazeera English colleagues who have been accused of spreading false news and working with the Muslim Brotherhood, and they've been held since December of last year, and they were recently denied bail. Of course, Al Jazeera strongly denies these accusations and continues to call on the Egyptian authorities to free them immediately. Now, that's all the time we have in the main show, but there's so much more to talk about as we take this discussion to our online post show. Let me tell you, though, about our next program. More than 200 schoolgirls have been kidnapped from northern Nigeria, and they're still yet to be found. Is there any hope of rescuing them? Malika, I know that you've been online. There are so many hashtags for this one story. That gives us a sense of what is happening with the online community.
And of course, our community has been pitching the story to us since it happened. Right.
Okay. So several weeks of saying, please do this story. Yes. It is a community pitch. We'll be hearing from some of the relatives. We'll be hearing from one of the senators from northern Nigeria. Of course, we'll be hearing from you about the schoolgirls in Nigeria who have been kidnapped. We'll be talking about their story on the next AJ stream. Until then, thanks for watching. It's good to see you again. This is the Stream's online post show. Now, we've been talking about the risk and the challenges facing journalists who work in places so dangerous that it could actually cost them their lives. I am handing the conversation over to our journalists because I know that you've got questions for each other.
Yeah.
Raza has a TV show. He's not in his TV show right now.
No, I'm not.
Hence why he's talking so much. It's like he's in a studio, he's happy. Okay, so Raza, what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to actually ask Carlotta because, you know, her book has come out recently, and in which she has mentioned several instances of intimidation and harassment. And perhaps it'll be good to know because, you know, short of killing and these brutal stories, intimidation is also a very, very, you know, powerful tool to keep people away from writing or speaking the truth. So maybe I think if Carlotta can relate some of those stories from Afghanistan and or Pakistan.
Sure. Carlotta?
Thank you. Yeah, I tell the story in my book, which is about the war in Afghanistan, but it points to a lot of the Taliban activity in Pakistan, and I write about this story of getting beaten up by intelligence agents in my hotel room in Pakistan. And the most chilling thing of it, I mean, they hit me in the face and I fell over and all that, but it was actually when I said to them, leave the photographer with me, and he was a Pakistani photographer, and the officer turned to me and said, he's Pakistani, we can do with him whatever we want. And they did take him off that night, and I was frantic, worrying about him all night. And he was basically warned off ever working for foreigners again, especially for the New York Times. And they put the fear of God in him, and I've seen them do this elsewhere. So as a foreigner, I got roughed up a bit, but I really, you know, was more protected than Pakistanis are. And so that's the problem often working in these areas as a foreign correspondent. You've got to watch out for any local collaborators, whether photographers or fixers, as we call them, or local reporters who are helping you, or even translators. We've had translators beheaded by Taliban in Afghanistan just for working with foreigners. So the local people we find are much more vulnerable because people know where they live, they don't go get on a plane and leave, and they're much more easily intimidated by intelligence agents who can knock on their door and who say, we know, you know, the route your daughter takes to school every day. She could have an accident. This sort of horrible, insidious pressure on people, which is aimed to deter. And what happened to us in Quetta that time was aimed at stopping us reporting the story.
Yeah. Femi, this is exactly what I wanted to be highlighted, that it's apart from the journalists, it's also the cameraman, the crew, staff, the fixers, the translators who equally face these hazards, you know, and my heart goes out to them as well, because often they remain invisible in this whole debate. I just want to check in with Carla very quickly, Carlotta, because I get a clear sense from Annabelle and Abaka and even Raza here that there's some stories where they feel it is worth their life. If you knew you were in a situation where it was really deadly, would you still go off and do the story? What story is worth that for you? I have
a maxim which I always repeat to anyone who works with me or any young reporter: no story is worth a life. And in fact, most editors who send people to war zones will tell you that, because you've got to, the main job of a journalist is to get the story and bring it back. And so if you go and get yourself killed, you don't get the story out. So in a war zone, that basically usually means if the bullets start coming in, you pull back. And of course, photographers and cameramen are the ones who do have to push forward and it's, you know, get the shot. A writer, which is what I am, has an advantage. You can pull back and gather the story from a distance sometimes. But I actually fervently believe you should always remember that no story is worth a life, because the best thing is to try and survive and get the story some other way. And sometimes you have to think of cleverer ways to do it if you can't get it the first time. But I would always try and tell a journalist, hold back when it gets really dangerous. Think if there's a cleverer way you can do this, and a safer way.
Malika.
Well, Abukar, I have a tweet question here, and I want you to answer this. Patrick wants to know if journalists find that their efforts while risking their lives, we've all heard all of our panel today talk about risking their lives, if those efforts are appreciated by the world. I know that's a really general question, but Abukar, do you sense that when you're going out there, putting your life on the line?
Actually, I can say yes. The world and the people of Somalia and the world appreciate the work we are doing here in Somalia, whether we are facing the danger or not. And let me also comment on what Carlotta said. There is a situation when you are writing for the international media, and you are your own reporter, you are your own translator, you are your own fixer, you are your own photographer. Like I'm in Somalia, I freelance for different media, and I'm the one going to the front line. Then it doesn't make sense for me if international journalists comes to a hotel taking escort and something like that. But the situation sometimes is more complicated for those who are placed in their own countries, at the same time covering for the other media outlets outside the country.
Right.
That's sometimes when it is too complicated. When I came to this question, thanks Patrick. For example, if I don't write a commentary for 1 month, the Somalis in the diaspora send me emails and sometimes call me and ask me, why are you silent? Who intimidated you? Yeah. Did you accept the threat? Then that's why they appreciate. And that's why I'm here. Because I lived in Stockholm when I fled from Mogadishu, and I decided to leave Stockholm and came back to Mogadishu. And you can compare the situation between Stockholm and Mogadishu.
Sure. Abukar, I'm going to share something that you sent us, one of the SMSs that you get quite regularly. Have a look on my laptop. We made it into a graphic here. One of the many threats. How many threats do you get in a week, would you say, Abukar?
Now, the threat by week is less than when I compare it to in 2007, 8, 9 to 11. Now we can get 2-3 threats by SMS, but the calls are more. There was a time you could get more than 5 to 6 threats per day. And I remember the day I told you 2 of my friends were killed. We buried one, we came back, another one was killed. Then someone called me and he said to me, Abukar, listen, I want to inform you that you are the next one to die. He told me that it was 6 days I was hiding in Mogadishu, and the 7th day I fled from the country. That's the way I went to Stockholm. And after 3 years I came back to Mogadishu. When I came back to Mogadishu, the situation was that when you want to go out of your house, you first open the door, count the people in front of you. If there are young men sitting there, you get back and close the door and ask the people outside, who are these guys? Why are they sitting here? And if you recognize them, you also come out and check if there is something you don't recognize outside of your house. Okay. The threat was like that.
All right. So I have to reluctantly wrap up this conversation because we have so many experiences to share and so many questions to ask of each other. I am going to ask you though to do me one thing, which is tell me very briefly, so I'm looking for 1 or 2 lines, the best advice you can give to somebody who's watching, who wants to be the next Raza Rumi or the next Carlotta Gore or Annabel Hernandez or Abukar al-Badri. What advice would you give someone watching who wants to do what you do? Very briefly, Raza.
Well, I think I would agree with Carlotta. No story is worth your life. So always take maximum, measures and precautions while reporting, but surely don't get intimidated easily because there are many out there to silence you, and you have to hold forth. You have to hold yourself together and keep your passion alive.
Right. Annabel, briefly, what would be the piece of advice you would give to anybody who wants to do journalism like you do in Mexico or maybe anywhere else in the world where it's dangerous?
Well, first, we cannot forget that our major duty is with the society. Second, I really believe, of course, that we have to survive to the story. I mean, the most important is to tell the story, not to die before tell the story. So I really think that we have to be better training. I mean, you know, the media really don't use to give good training to the journalists.
Trained.
We have to search by our better training.
Right, get training. Abakar, your final piece of advice would be what? Somebody who wanted to do what you're doing.
I want to say this. There are three groups here, like the criminals, the victims, and the witness. And the journalists are the witness. The criminal wants to intimidate you, not to tell the story of the victim. If you fear from death, then sometimes you miss. I don't advise anyone to die for a story, but I encourage everyone to tell their story.
Thank you. And Carlotta, finally.
Well, I would say if you think you want to do it, then you must try it, because I would still say it's the best job in the world. So
even when your dad tells you don't do it, right, Carlotta?
Yeah.
Even when your dad says don't do it.
Yeah, it's you've got to want to do it.
Right.
But if you feel it, then follow your nose and give it a try.
All right. Look out for their work around the world, in Pakistan, in Somalia, in Mexico, and wherever Carlotta ends up next. You know their names. You'll have their Twitter hashtags as well. To be continued. So let me tell you about our very next show. More than 200 schoolgirls have been kidnapped from northern Nigeria. They have yet to be found. But is there any hope of rescuing them? We'll hear how Nigerians are responding to this crisis. Until then, I'll see you online.